Or turn on the recording and then share my screen. Okay, so I believe you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, today we are going to talk about, we are still dealing with functions, but we talk about scope. So I also would say, do you know anything about scope in Python?
No.
Let me type something. Do you remember this thing? LEGB, do you remember the meaning? Because
No.
in
No,
our,
have we discussed
yeah,
it?
in one of our early classes, we mentioned it when we talked about namespaces in Python. So it actually stands for, look, let me say from the back, built in. Then we also have the global. And we also have enclosed. I'm sure I mentioned this thing earlier. And then we have local. So this defines like the 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 namespaces in Python where variables are stored. Okay. So among your built-in namespaces, in your built-in namespace, there are different variables that come the moment we run the Python script. They automatically come in to play. They are built-in. You can see a list of them if you go and type it in Google. Built-in namespaces in Python. Or the built-in. There's a way to also print it on screen and you will see those functions and variables that are there. For example, print. You know, when we just come and say maybe print, we can say print this. Before we started this code, we did not write any function called print. But if I run the code, it is going to print out something because print is a function that exists in the built-in namespace. However, if I type something that doesn't exist, if you type in a function that doesn't exist in the built-in, you find out that it's going to generate an error. Do you remember when we talked about this?
Yes.
Yeah, and I say we'll get back to it when we go to functions. So now we have now reached functions to talk about it.
Sorry, sir. There's something you said last time. I don't know if you've treated it.
What is that? Remind us.
I could remember the time you made mention of Lambda. That's you look at it. I don't know if it's among the ones you taught last week.
Okay, last week we mentioned, I just used lambda function, right? To solve that problem. We can also talk about it.
Okay.
So, but for now, just to remind us, we have these 4 namespaces in Python. So the built-in one is the one that comes whenever you run your Python environment. There are some functions that are available to you, which you can use. One of them we say is print function. is already there by default. You can also say something like list. You just say list and you see it there. The reason why you can use those keywords is because they exist in the built-in namespace of Python. Okay. Now, the second namespace is the global namespace. So whenever you have a Python file like this, and you start declaring variables or writing functions, those functions will be stored in the global namespace. So if I come now and say name is equal to Luke. So the name is equal to Luke is a variable. If we run this program, this variable will be stored in our global namespace. Okay, now if I don't do, maybe I don't define what name is, then I attempt, let me not even use name, let's say, okay, our name. If I attempt to print it, of course, you can see from our IDE is already underlined in this name because it's not defined. Python does not know what this name stands for. So if I attempt to run this code now, it's going to throw an error. Now, the reason why it doesn't throw an error when you use something like print and other functions is simply because they exist in the built-in namespace for Python. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, okay, now, whenever you put function in your code and variables, they are stored in the global namespace. But when you define a function, when you have a function, okay, let's just say as we continue, you understand the local namespace and the built-in namespace. So let's just continue. Now, we are going to do something. I say x is equal to 2. I can ask define a function. And I say here, print x. And I say x is equal to 3. Right? And then I call my function. No, sorry. And I call my function. Okay. Now I want you to tell me if I run this function, what will happen? It's a question to the class. So if I have this x is 2, sorry, x is 2, and then I write a function. In my function, I say print x. And then I say x is equal to 3. Now, the question to you is, when I run this function, what will happen? Benjamin, what do you think will happen? Nkechi, what do you think will happen? I put there.
Yes.
And think about it. Let's see what's going to happen when we run this code. If we should run this code, what will happen? Elsewhere, do you want to try?
Yeah, I think the function will pick x as to pick the value of x before the print.
So what will be the output if I run it?
X will be 2.
Okay, so to print x equal to 2. Good.
Yes.
Any other answer? Nkechi, you don't have answer for this one. Okay. Benjamin and Nkechi, people don't have answers. We will continue. Now, at the end of this class, hopefully we'll be able to understand and know what the answer should be. So I will not say the answer for now. I wish you people had tried. I don't know why you're silent. Okay, so let's continue. Now, if I have a value x being equal to 1, and I have a function and then I have if I say print x, in this case now, and we run our function, let me assign a value to x here and say x is equal to 2. Then I'll print x, and then I'll come out of my function before I run my function, or after I run the function, I'll go ahead and print x. Okay, so what am I doing? I assign x the value of 1. I now write a function. Inside of my function, I assign x to be equal to 2. And then I print x. So when I run my function, it's going to assign x 2 and print x. Then, after running the function on line 20, on line 22, I will print x. Now, let's see what it's going to give us. So I save it and I'm going to run the file. Now, if you can see what is shown in the terminal, when I run the function, okay, it printed x as 2. But after running the function where x was printed as 2, I then printed x again. Outside of the function, it printed x as 1. Now, this is what's happening. Remember I said, when you start writing your file and you declare a variable, that variable is stored in the global namespace, right?
Okay.
Now, when you write a function, also, the function is on the level of the global namespace. Now I call the function. Inside the function, I change the value of x. And then I printed x. Of course, x is now 2. So it happened to be 2. But after that, when I came back and printed x after running the function, x still remains as 1. The question someone will ask now is why? Now, the reason is this. Inside your function, you are now in the enclosed namespace. Okay, so any variable you declare inside your function is only going to be accessed inside your function. Okay, which means if we go out of the function, we cannot access this x equal to 2, because this x equal to 2 is stored in the enclosed namespace. Remember, we're talking about built-in, and then we'll talk of global. Now we are trying to not enclose, sorry, local. This is local. Not enclosed, sorry, this is local. We'll come to enclose later. My bad. So this is local. So this variable is local to this function. So when we talk about scope, scope talks about the region in which variables, functions can be visible or accessed in your code. This is a concept you need to understand so that when you now start writing codes, you understand how your variable works. Because if you don't understand it, sometimes you'll be confused why certain things is happening. That's what we're trying to explain it. Now, in our function, we have the said x should be equal to 2. But this x equal to 2, I'm now saying is going to be stored in the local namespace, not in the global namespace. Meanwhile, x equal to 1 remains in the global namespace. So when you
Because it's
print,
outside the
yeah, because it's, remember, the global namespace, anything in your file, on the base level of your file, we are talking about the global namespace. Now, x is in the base level, is the global namespace. So in that sort of like dictionary, x will be 1. Then in that same
function.
global namespace, you have this function defined. So the function is also in the global namespace. Then inside the function, we said
Now
x
the
should be
local.
2. This is now local to the function. So it's called a local namespace, right?
Okay.
And then you now say print x. Then you call the function, which is where you run what the function is. When I run it, of course, it printed x as 2. But then in line 23, I then say print x. Somebody may think that x should now be
It's
2. The
same.
value of x should be 2. But when you say print x, x is 1. Why? This x that is 2 is in local
It's
namespace.
local.
Yeah, so when I printed x in this level, it is the global namespace that it goes to find what x is, and x is 1. Okay. So we are going to still throw more light. Now, if I comment out this x equal to 2, if I comment out x equal to 2 and run the code, what will this x be? What will this print? Can you guess?
It will be
Do not take 1.
Okay.
Since none is defined under the local, no variable is defined under.
because from the global, x is equal to 1. And when it come out, you will still get 1. It will be the local will print 1, and the global will also print 1.
Okay, that's good. That's correct. So if we run it, let's save it and run. When we run it now, both of them are 1, 1. Now, something is happening. Remember, I wrote this LEGB to you first of all, and I said this is what it means.
Abbreviation.
Yeah, now, whenever Python is trying to resolve what does this variable mean, or what does this name stand for, it starts from local. So the first time when we assign x to be equal to 2, and then we run it, it will check when the code is in this function to ask a question, what is x? It will first check the local namespace. It will find that x is equal to 2. So it printed 2. Now I have commented this x equal to 2, like removed it. When it checks the local namespace, it will not find the variable x.
The variable.
Then it will go to the next level. For now, we'll just pretend that there's no enclosed here. The next level from local will be global. It will go to global and check, is there x? Then it will find x. Oh, in the global, x is 1. Okay?
So
But
it's not easy for both of them.
yeah, so in other words, the global variable, you can access it inside your function. But the other thing we'll quickly notice, you cannot modify it inside your function. So if you attempt this modification, if you attempt to modify where you say x is equal to 2, you will find out that there will be a modification, and it will be, the modification will be stored in the local namespace. So x will be equal to 2, and that will be found in local namespace. It will not affect the global. The global value will not change. Whenever your function finishes, the global remains what it is. Now, if you intend to modify the global, there is a keyword we use. So I can come here and say this global X. Now, if I run this code again, remember the first time when we ran it without global X, this will print 2 and the global printed 1. But now I say global X, I will save it. Then I run it again. See, both of them are now what? 2. Because of this keyword global, I am kind of declaring that let X be the X in the global namespace, right? Which is 1. So whenever I modify X here, I'm actually modifying the global namespace because the X in the function now, I've made it global. I have made it global. So I say global X. Now again, if I change the code a bit and say, let it be that I did not declare X. So this is like a comment. And I remove the keyword global. Then within my function, I say X is equal to 2. If I run the code this way, when I run the function, X will be printed. Let's try and run it. Now, when I run the function, X is printed in line 21. So you can see it in my terminal too. But by the time I get to line 23 and say, let me print X, I have error. If you look at my terminal, you'll find out that I have name error. X is not defined because within my local namespace in this function, Python understood what X is because I declared it here. But when I came out of the function and then tried to call X, in the global space, there's nothing like X. So it throws a name error. It is not defined, meaning that Python does not know what X is anymore in the global namespace. Now, in resolving, it doesn't resolve from global to enclosed or local. It to check, once you're in the global, it will check the global. After checking the global, the next place it's going to check is the built-in. When it doesn't find it in these two, it will say it doesn't know what it is. When you're in enclosed, it will check. If it doesn't find it in enclosed, it will check global, then it will check built-in. When you're in the local, if it doesn't find what it's looking for in local, it will check the enclosed, then it will check the global, then it will check the built-in. This is how scope works in Python. It checks that way. That's why we put it LEGB, right? How it's going to resolve your variables from L to E to G to B. Now, that's what happened here. When you resolved it within the level of local, it knew what it was, it printed it. But when we attempt to resolve it in the global space, we had a problem. Did not know what it is because it's not there. And it doesn't go into check local. It will go the next level to check. Now, if I put this keyword, assuming I did not declare it and I have global X, let's see if it's going to see it in the global. So we save it and run. You can see it saw it. So it printed it in the local and also printed it in the global, right? Because global X, even though the variable is in my function, because of the keyword global X, this variable is now in the global namespace. Whenever I run the function, this variable will be stored in the global namespace. Then it's able to see it, even though I did not declare it. So this is now when you talk about what is the scope of this variable. The scope of the variable is now global. Okay? The scope is now global. But if I remove the keyword, it's local. The scope of this X, where it can be seen in our program, is just locally within this function. That's what we mean by scope. So you need to understand your variables and their scope, where you can access them. If I also declare another variable, say B is equal to 12, this variable I declare within this function, it cannot be accessed outside the function because of this issue of scope and namespace. Okay, so let's now still add something else. I hope we understand this concept so far.
Yes.
So let me add another one. Let me define another function. This one now is like an inner function. In this function, so let me print. I print outer x. Now here, I'm still going to print inner x. Okay, so I'm printing in outer I print x, in inner I print x, and then I'll still print my global x. And then inner I also have to reassign x to say x is equal to 3. Then I'll call the inner function so that it will run. I'll just call it inside. I'll call it inside the outer function. So what's happening here is that within outer, I define a new function. This function is inside outer. Then still inside outer, I called this function in line 24. Now, when I call it, we are going to have this print executed. When I call the outer function, it's going to print its own x. So just by calling outer, it's going to print its own, and then it is going to call the inner at the same time. And then we will see what x is going to be. So now, globally, x is 1. In the outer function, x is 2. In the inner function, x is 3. So I save it and run. So you can see for the global, x is 1. For the outer, x is 2. And for the inner, x is 3. Okay, because I defined it accordingly, like that. Now, you know quite well, if I decide to do this here, global x, whatever, or let me just not do it there, so that I come in inner. In inner, I can decide to call it global x. And instead of assigning it the value 3, you find out that when I print it, the inner now, we pick the global one because I'm saying the x within the inner is global. So save and we'll run it. Yeah, observe that. So you see the inner now has the value of the global. And then the global is 1, the outer is still 2. So if I do local in this x is local to the outer function, then in the inner function, the x is now operating with the global one, similar with that example we said before. Now, there's another keyword I want to introduce here, which is this non-local x. Non-local x. Now, let's see what happens when I print that x. Saved it, and then I run it. You find out that the inner function, x has a value of 2. Now, this non-local simply checks the next higher level, what is x, and then prints it. In this case, I don't even need to write non-local, but I'm just writing it here for you to see. Even if I don't write what non-local is, if I don't write this, it's still going to print 2. So if I don't do that and save, it's still going to print 2. Why? Because it's going to follow this resolution from local. In this case now, in the case of this our function, this level is local. It's our local namespace. And then the next level here is now enclosed.